Eric Parkinson is a seasoned film executive producer and distribution expert with over 30 years experience in the industry. He has worked on the successful release of over 1,500 films, including major titles such as Terminator, Platoon, and Highlander. Eric's expertise spans film production, financing, sales, and distribution, making him a key resource for independent filmmakers. In this episode, Eric shares essential strategies and techniques for creating a profitable film package, helping filmmakers to secure financing and ensure commercial success in today's competitive market.
Been in the film business a really long time. I started out making videos for MTV back in the early 80s when MTV actually still ran music videos. I think it's mostly a programming of reality shows and stuff like that now. But that was really good training in Los Angeles to learn, how to use equipment, what works, what doesn't work, operating budgets, and dealing with the hierarchy of distributors, and in that case, record companies, but it's very similar to dealing with film distributors. And very quickly, just like after 1 year of doing music videos, I found myself in an unusual situation where I was offered the opportunity to become general manager of a company that was in a new field of video distribution. Back in 1984, there were actually two competing formats for video where people could watch at home. One of them was called Betamax, and the other one was called VHS. It was so new that nobody even understood what was going to prevail and how it was going to work. So starting in November of 1984, I started going to some of the film festivals, such as the American Film Market in Los Angeles. Back then it was held at the Riot Hyatt, which is that Hyatt Hotel on Sunset Boulevard, infamous for rock and roll crazy parties. But, we were going around and talking to different producers from around the world and saying, there's a new trend where people are watching movies at home, and it's called video. And we'd like to license the right to put your film out on VHS or Betamax. And they're like, what is that? We don't understand what that is. And nobody really knew what was a fair deal structure. And back then, there was like 8 of us who were acquiring rights to this new video format. And we all kind of sat down and said, what do you think is a fair royalty? Nobody really knew. Kind of at that point came up with the concept that the producer would get 20%. And of course, that ultimately proved years later to be horrifically abusive for the program rights owners. And that formula for the royalty participation started to change. And so did the format. So obviously the format went from Betamax and VHS to just VHS until about, maybe 2002. There was a brief period in there where people were putting movies out on laser discs, which were about the size of an album. And they were slightly better quality than a VHS video. And then everything switched in the early 2000s to DVD. DVD was better quality, it was cheaper to make, and easier to merchandise because it didn't take up as much shelf space at a retail store. And we started selling DVDs and reached a point where we were selling literally millions of copies of DVDs every month to Walmart stores. Walmart had slowly emerged from just being a small rural southern chain to being the most dominant retailer in the world. And certainly when it came to the distribution of pre-recorded videos, they were 51% of the market, meaning that an order from Walmart was worth more than all of the other stores in North America combined. And that became a really important customer to build a marketing plan around. And as a result, you saw all kinds of interesting scenarios where filmmakers from James Cameron to Spike Lee, actors like Hugh Jackman, Lady Gaga, they would start coming to Northwest Arkansas to talk about the release of their movies onto the DVD format. They would meet with Walmart, and they would show up at these Saturday morning meetings, and they would do, everything from a concert if they were a musician to, just doing a lot of handshaking. But it was because, the support of Walmart for a movie could really, really make a big difference. And it's difficult to say on the upside how much difference Walmart made during that period of time, but certainly on the downside, when they look at a movie like the Silence of the Lambs sequel, which was called Hannibal, they were very offended with some of the content where one of the people was thrown in a pig sty and the pigs ate the guy, and they just didn't like it, and Walmart didn't carry that title, and as a result, it was about $12 million of lost revenue because of a content decision, even for a movie with the stellar cast and the pedigree of having the momentum of being a sequel to Academy Award Best Picture winner. So that was an interesting time, about 10, 12 years where doing business with Walmart as a distributor was a lot like having an ATM with an unlimited balance. And that was a lot of fun. It became less fun about 2017, 2018, when the home streaming became so much more dominant that people quit buying DVDs and Blu-rays unless it was like a really high-profile movie, like a Mission Impossible or Avengers film or something like that. And so all of the smaller independent films that had previously counted on the DVD market as being close to 50% of your revenue upside, it just became zero. And in some cases, it became worse than zero because Walmart would order 40 or 50,000 DVDs and only sell 10,000 and send the other 40,000 back for full credit. And what you've done is you've basically taken your potential profit and you've invested it in dead inventory as well as warehouse space and paying UPS to ship it out and to ship it back. And it just became an unattractive scenario. So about 2018, I made a decision to kind of get out of the DVD and Blu-ray business and refocus the company into one of two areas. I kind of apologize. I kind of skipped over some of my business background. I was working at Continental Video in the early 80s. I had an independent company called Twin Tower Entertainment. And ultimately, I joined Hemdale Films. Hemdale Films, I was the CEO and originally set up a video company, and then ultimately saw the Hemdale Films all the way through the sale of the library to MGM. In 1996, we sold that library, and that included movies like Terminator, Platoon, Last Emperor, Hoosiers, Whales of August, 170 films. We sold that to MGM, and it was part of a combined roll-up with Credit Lyonnais Bank that also included the libraries of Dino De Laurentiis, Canon Films, Orion Pictures. There might have been a few others in that group. But these were all independent film companies that were hugely successful in the 80s and 90s and ultimately rolled all into MGM. Then I bought a company that was a book publisher. The publishing company was called Hannover House. Truman Press and Hannover House was the releasing label. I bought that company in 2002 because at that time, Walmart, Kmart, Target, Best Buys, major retailers of DVD product in America, were not accepting new vendors. If you wanted to be a DVD distributor in 2002, your option was really to go to an existing supplier like Warner Brothers or somebody like that who already had a vendor number. And I didn't want to pay that double distribution fee. So by purchasing a book company, we were able to be an existing vendor that added DVDs. And of course, they closed that door shortly thereafter and said, if you don't already sell DVDs, you can't add it to your existing product line of toys or whatever your existing vendor number is. But that was a way that Hanover House got into Walmart, Target, Best Buy, and all of those major retailers at a time when even Sir Richard Branson couldn't do it. He tried to open up Virgin as a direct label and was not able to do that. So that was a good opportunity for us to jump in at the DVD business during that real glory season of 2002 to about 2015, 2016. But what we do now at Hanover House is two areas of activity. One area of activity we're not even active in yet, but we've been developing it now for several years, and that is that we are establishing a streaming service primarily for independent movies. And the name of that service is called MyFlix, which is MyFlix. So it's like Netflix, but it's MyFlix. And we have met with all of my colleagues who are also independent film distributors, and we've signed up 42 libraries of independent films. And collectively, there's about 15,000 independent films that will go onto MyFlix. It may not surprise you to hear that it's extremely expensive to launch a streaming service like that. That's why, places like Disney has Hulu and Paramount has their labels. And I mean, most of the streaming services have a large corporate partner or deep pockets affiliation. And So it's been a little harder for us to launch the MyFlix, but that is something that is, and as my cat would agree, that's something more than aspirational. It's something that we're definitely going to do, and feel like it will provide a good outlet for a lot of independent films. Um, and speaking of which, when we first came up with MyFlix, it was very difficult for an independent distributor to get a lot of their films onto streaming services. And you would have a guy that might have 400 movies in their library, and only 20 or 30 were accepted by, at the time, places like Netflix and HBO Max. But of course, now that has leveled out a lot with the growth of companies like Tubi and Roku, Amazon Prime. It's a lot easier to get a movie onto streaming services now. The real challenge is, how do you get people to ask for your movie? And we'll come around to that, because the agenda you sent me does bring that up as one of the questions, which is, how can you maximize your return on investment or your success through the streaming services? The other area that Hannover House is involved in is that we are producing films. And in that respect, we're extremely active in the worldwide financing of those films. There are, in our opinion, three general categories of film productions that seem to be working right now in the international marketplace. Everybody's familiar with the high-end films. It's a little bit like winning a lottery ticket, because it's very difficult to put together a film with the level of casting that is necessary to get the level of pre-sales that would support that level of casting. It's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. If you got big stars like Bradley Cooper and Dwayne the Rock Johnson committed to your film, they're going to want a really big check. But where do you go to get that really big check? There's only a handful of places, and they have a lot to choose from. So to me, the really high-end movies are a lot more aspirational and harder to put together than the meat and potatoes of movies that can be more readily put together with a combination of state or government incentives, private equity, and then modest distribution pre-sale. So we are involved at Hannover House in putting together movies mostly in the category of 2 to 5 million, although we do have some projects that are slightly over that. We have an action film that we're doing in Malta, which is 22 million. And that, again, happened because we were very fortunate to have a strong script, and that strong script attracted the actors, and the strong script and the strong actors attracted some significant pre-sale opportunities. But most of what we do is not movies like that. Most of what we do are much smaller films. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are shooting this week a film, and it's being funded entirely by Hannover House. It's called Native Fables, and it's a collection of 5 short films about Native American issues and historical events. This weekend, well, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then the following Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we are shooting Trail of Tears, and it's a project we're making in association with United Kitoa Band of Cherokee Indians, and they have provided not capital, but they provided historical research. They provided crew people and cast people and on-set assistance to make sure that we are historically accurate. And I think that we'll end up with a really good film for the Trail of Tears. So that's an exciting little project for us to do, and it's not something that requires that we go out and do a major public company offering of millions of dollars. It's something that we are able to easily fund internally. Yeah. The next level up of movies kind of fit what I consider to be like the standard 3-legged stool of a feature film financing package. And those are films where about 1/3 of the funding is coming as a result of a state or governmental incentive rebate, whether it's a cash rebate like you get in Malta, or if it's a tax rebate like a lot of the states offer here in America, where you actually get the rebate in the form of a tax credit, and you have to find somebody to buy that tax credit, which always results in a discount. They don't buy it for 100 cents on the dollar. Sometimes they'll buy it for as little as 85 cents on the dollar. But that's whatever your net amount is, you try to arrange that about 1/3 of your budget is coming from incentives. About 1/3 of your budget needs to come from in the form of a bankable or at least semi-bankable distribution guarantee. And this is where Hanover House has been very helpful to some of these producers, where we can provide sales estimates, historical support for why those sales estimates are realistic and obtainable. We're also a publicly traded company, so we have the ability to generate capital if needed through the sale of stock in order to pay off a guarantee. But you still make that 1/3 of your budget. And then the third leg of the three-legged stool we prefer is some form of private equity. And whether that's getting, family and friends to put up some money, or getting the producer and director to defer a significant portion of their fees, or a combination thereof. Where you go out and you have somebody that really believes in your story, and they're willing to risk, a portion of the budget because you have this pre-sale and you have this incentive, and that tends to be a really good financial formula. Of course, like I said, your agenda here. I've skipped past how do you get the pre-sale,
Yeah.
and so you really kind of have to do a lot of work to get to that point. So
Yeah. So, so should we get dive into, at the moment, for a lot of filmmakers who are here and they're looking to develop a film, and they're looking to develop a film pitch that actually has potential to make a profit. I mean, with that, you have to create a film that's actually marketable. And I'm wondering, it was really interesting to hear the history of all, of film over the last 30 years and how different things are right now. So in 2025, if you had to really boil it down, what makes a film really attractive to distributors, for example, or to, sales agent, and something that you feel is
that's a very good
marketable for an
question, and it
audience?
is the most important question that an independent producer can ask themselves as they put together a project. Um, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear I get pitched a lot of stuff, and everybody kind of skips over, is this marketable, as being a relevant question, and it is clearly, to a distributor, the most important question. Um, you have in your agenda some questions that go into greater specificity about what makes a strong package, but I would have to say, first and foremost, um, coming up with a solid log line or 2 or 3 sentence synopsis is super important. You don't have to go into the details of all the subplots and things like that. If you can't explain it in 2 or 3 sentences, the distributor is going to assume that it's going to be very difficult to make a trailer or a commercial that explains it to the audience. And we're always, as the distributors, we're always looking for the first kind of impressions about how does this project strike me as a potential viewer, and how will that also translate into consumers who might walk past your poster in a theater lobby, and if it doesn't stand out to them, they just keep walking because there's 25 other posters lined up down the halls as they walk to the screening room. So um, I would have to say that the best step to do is to come up with a solid pitch as to what the project is, and to come up with a piece of artwork that is almost like a teaser poster. You don't have to go all the way to the level of making like a credit block and putting logos and things like that on it. But if you, as a filmmaker, can express to a distributor your creative vision, and that creative vision is shown in a poster art that they can say, "Oh, I get that. That looks really cool. I think people will want to see that." That's going to help your pitch a lot. And if you don't have a good piece of art and a compelling 3 or 4 sentence summary, they're not going to read your script. They may not. They're not going to open up a big PowerPoint presentation. It's like, I don't think that's going to work for me. It's real easy to reject product when you've got a convoy coming at you every day from producers. And I just feel like a lot of people don't pay attention
Yeah.
to what's important, and making a film easily understood and easy to market is going to take you a long way towards getting a good bankable pre-sale from a major distributor, because you're showing them this is what people are going to see. And so that would be one of my first comments. But uh,
Yeah, and I think one thing that I always tell people, because I have a marketing background, not even in the film industry, but the main thing is that a confused mind never buys. A confused mind never takes action. And if people are confused as to what your type of film is going to be, they're most likely not going to watch it. Because most people who these days go on a streaming platform, they're looking for a film and they want that. Ah, this film is going to
That's
be
right.
like that. And if they don't understand what your film is going to be, they're never gonna, spend the 2 hours watching it. But I'm wondering, to what extent can, we understand that that film needs to be something that people will relate to and they understand, but to what extent does the film need to be different, new, creative, in that, versus having something that people
Well,
understand
I mean,
exactly what it
I think
is?
that's, and I don't want to say that's almost assumed, but if your film isn't different, it's going to be difficult to say that this is the reason it deserves to be made. If you just say, I'm doing a complete remake of 25 other films you've already seen and are already available, that's easy for the distributor to say, well, that's not sellable for me. But once you come up with a unique twist, that's a very good point. Um, you know, the, when you're selling an independent film to a distributor, and you're talking about conceptual content or what makes it different, um, you have to understand that what makes the big movie successful is usually the momentum of a known IP property or the credibility and the fan following of major stars. And an independent film probably isn't going to have either of those unless you're very smart and very creative. And one of the points that you just said is, you know, how do you make your film instantly communicate? If somebody goes to a advertiser supported streaming service such as Tubi or Roku, and 93% of people that go to those sites, they don't know what they're going to watch. They're like, hey, you want to see a movie? Yeah, what's on? I don't know, let's see what they got. They don't specifically say, I want to see this particular movie. I mean, maybe they'll say, yeah, I want to see that new Demi Moore horror film. I mean, there's exceptions, but most of the time, 93% of the people want to go and be told what would be a good suggestion for them. So if you have chosen as an independent producer, and I'm just going to pick kind of a goofy analogy. If you've chosen to make a horror film and your star is the Bigfoot monster, you should probably have the word Bigfoot in your title. You should probably have a big, cryptozoid, primate looking monkey on your artwork, because that way you're able to, if somebody's scanning through the just cacophony and plethora of just thousands of movies that they could choose from, they see that big monster, they see the name Bigfoot, they go, let's see Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot movies, and maybe that's one of those categories where they haven't yet to exhaust the audience. It seems like there's still a demand for Bigfoot movies, but um, the same thing could be said for public domain
Yep.
stories like Grimm's fairy tales, for example. The audience is going to say, oh, I remember Hansel and Gretel, or I remember, Rapunzel, whatever thing. Yeah, there's a lot of momentum that a filmmaker can tap into that creates instant recognition to the audience, and I think that gives you a leg up. It gives you an advantage over all the other films where there isn't that kind of an emotional or historic knowledge already for the property. And that's just to make up for not having.
Yeah. And I think absolutely, and I think you mentioned so many interesting things there in terms of making that film package that's sort of that's actually investable. Use tax credits and incentives and soft funding. Up to 30% of your, or more if you can, but at least 30% of your budget, to have some sort of pre-existing audience, whether that be through works that are in the public domain, whether that be through star power and so on, that you've got. Anything else that you can think of in terms of before moving on to actually preparing a pitch deck, just in terms of what else can filmmakers who are working on a really kind of shoestring budget or a
Yeah.
lower budget under $1 million, what else can they put in their film that that would make it easier to market later
Well, I
down the
mean,
line?
you kind of asked two questions, or at least the way I heard two questions. One of them was still a pitch presentation for a distributor, and the other one was what's actually in the film. But
Yeah, so we'll move into the pitch presentation in just a moment, but still just talking about the film and the marketability of the film. Are there any other elements aside from that
Yeah.
pre-existing stories, the talent, the tax credits, anything else that the film package can have to
Well,
make it
yeah.
more
I mean,
marketable?
I think that to the extent that you are able to get some actors with some credibility and momentum to their resumes, that's helpful. Um, I have, I currently have, and I can't say exactly the person because there's an NDA, but I currently have a package in front of me that we are planning to help finance, where the director has been in a lot of movies himself as an actor, and he decided that he wanted to direct, and he made the intelligent decision of contacting a lot of his high profile friends and saying, "You got to help me out. I'm in transition to being a director. I can only pay a SAG scale. I know you normally get millions of dollars." um, and that becomes an attractive package for a distributor, where for an affordable price you now have a lot of name actors in it. I also think that the type of movie you're making is extremely important to the distributor. Um, you know, it's often said that comedy doesn't work, and it really works in the country of origin because, if you put, Will Ferrell in a film and he has some crazy wisecrack jokes, that particular vernacular might not even be understood in the UK or South Africa, even though they're English speaking nations. And so, comedy is something that I would say most independent producers should probably stay away from, because more likely than not, you won't get international sales, and it's such a big percentage of what you can do. We have a film that we're currently distributing at limited basis theatrically, and we did the limited theatrical in order to enhance its profile so that we can do some interesting things on streaming, which I can go into a little bit later. But the international revenue is already greater than our entire domestic revenue, including our projected income from streaming, because it hits a genre that is very friendly to those buyers. And that particular genre is horror film. It's horror. It's got an exorcism theme, and those seem to always do well around the world, because um, people that like horror films dig it, and people that are religious dig it because the exorcism theme reinforces their own religious dogma beliefs. So it works in two ways. But comedy is tough to sell. Horror is a little bit easier. As much as I love westerns, I'm currently directing and starring in a western right now called Indian Territory. That's a tough sell internationally. Movies that are primarily African American casts, they are hard to sell internationally, and it's a strange phenomena, which I think is somewhat born from cultural racism. I don't know why, but you can't sell a lot of African American movies internationally. That makes it harder to put together a package. Doesn't mean the films aren't meritorious and shouldn't be made. It just means you can't count on foreign. Um, but clearly, action adventure films are going to be the most friendly for getting a distribution pre-sale. Comedy is the least friendly, and then somewhere in between there, you've got everything else. Like family films is probably number two to action adventure. Um, Drama is more difficult, just
Yep.
because they tend to be very language specific, and a lot of dubbing is required to, if you got a husband and wife having a psychodrama meltdown, it it's loses a lot of the timing when you start putting it into Greek and other languages. So anyway, I don't know if I'm really answering the question, because it was kind of a broad question, but I would say the
Yeah.
genre is really important. And then what you mentioned a little bit earlier was something unique about your film that doesn't already have 25 contemporary and comparable movies like it out there. That's a good selling point, because when you're sitting in the Palais in Cannes, France, and buyers from South Korea and Philippines and Malaysia are walking past your booth, you got to be able to tell them in just a few seconds why they need this movie for their territory. And you can't say it's just like everything else. You got to say this is outrageous. This is different. This is
Yep.
new. This is the first movie like this. So I wish I could say there's a black box, but try to make your movie
Okay.
different. It would be just the general statement.
Interesting. And I'd love to move on to talking a little bit about putting together that pitch deck specifically for investors. And if we can focus, on the business side of it. So I think a lot of filmmakers here, they sort of know, okay, well, I need to make the pitch deck visually appealing, and and they put all the creative elements in it. But what needs to go into a pitch deck from a business and commercial point of view in order to make it so that an investor actually takes
That's
it
a really good
seriously?
question, and I see that pitch decks tend to be where the majority of projects that come to us collapse. That the producer putting together the pitch deck, whether it's asking for us to do a pre-sale or asking us to make an equity investment, or giving it to their friends on the golf course or whatever that they're asking to make an equity investment. I The biggest mistake I think that producers make is not creating realistic and obtainable income forecasts and an explanation of the revenue waterfalls. And a lot of times they have, producers have such a disjointed perception as to how the whole flow of cash works. I have had people contact me and say, I see on Box Office Mojo the movie did 1.2 million at the box office, but your royalty statement only reports half of that. Where's the rest of my money? I'm going, you don't realize that the theaters take a cut. I mean, that's it seems kind of basic to somebody that's been in business a long time, but there are a lot of producers that see stuff like that and they don't understand the economics of it. And if you don't understand the economics of it, you're not going to give an investor or a bank a realistic forecast as to what the film actually can make. It's it's really important to me, if you're an investor, that the production company coming to you with a pitch and asking for an investment has a not just a compelling story for why the movie should be made. And yeah, the creative is important, but to the investor, most people, unless they've won the lotto, they have worked their asses off to make money, and they are very protective of it, and they want to see an obtainable plan where they're going to get their money back. And if you can't talk to them at that level and say, there's a downside, there's an upside, let's don't even talk about the 1 in a million crazy potential, which seems to be what everybody always does when they have a pitch. They say, this is the next Blair Witch project, which made 200 million. It's like, no, it's not. That's like saying, we're going to win the lotto tonight. I mean, it's so out of the realm of realistic revenue potential. If you bring it down to the reality and you say, this is how much money this type of movie is making on a 6 month or 1 year basis at Tubi. This is how much Roku is doing. This is how much you can get off of Amazon Prime, or if you can get a premium sale to somebody that buys it exclusively for 18 months or 2 years and pays you a premium license before you do the AVOD, and actually back it up with comparable films and comparable numbers. If you can do that, then you've come way ahead of the rest of the pack as far as saying, I have a realistic business plan. You do also have to understand. Yeah.
I have a question on that. On what you just said there. So for filmmakers who, perhaps their film is a bit too low budget, or they don't have a sales agent on board, or, pre-sales, or even a sales agent on board in that development phase, how can filmmakers know what other films are actually making online? Because a lot of the kind of the box office stats are
Right.
sort of just for theaters, right? But to actually know what a indie film made on Tubi, is there anywhere where they can find that kind of
Yeah,
information?
and that's really where I'm coming back to a big, long, circuitous route to say that one of the most important things, even before you talk to Uncle Jimmy about joining the film as an equity player, is to find a distributor, because the major distributors will share with you information to the extent that they don't cross over into proprietary, non-disclosure stuff. But like, for example, it's like there's quite a few major distributors that are friendly and will talk to up and coming producers, such as Mill Creek Entertainment, which is part of Alliance Entertainment Group, such as Vision Films, which Lise Romanoff runs, and the company that I use for a lot of my films for VOD placement is called All Channel Films. And if you contact the people, for example, at All Channel Films, the president is Seth Kate and his head of sales is Dylan Reynolds, and you say, I've got a low budget horror film. It doesn't have any name stars in it, or maybe it's got this person or that person who are kind of a fledgling B level star. Um, and you know, what do you think is realistic and possible? They'll give you those numbers, and they'll say, "Well, we just did such and such on a Hannover House horror film that didn't have stars, and we did so much from Magnum Entertainment or so much for Monarch Films," and they'll give you that information that helps you put together a private equity forecast. Um, you can't rely on your distributors to do all your work for you, but they want your film. If you've got a good film that they can sell and make 25% commission on the placement, they're going to take a few minutes to share with you information. If a distributor is so disinterested that they won't share with you information about how to put together a stronger package, they're probably either the wrong distributor for you or your film is the wrong film for them. Maybe they only deal with a higher level of film and don't want to help their producer clients put together a package. And it is important to find the right distributor, somebody that you can have that direct communication with and who will help you out. But I would say that the first order of progress that I would do is create the artwork and create the log line, then go to a distributor and say, we are putting together this film. What do you think is a realistic sales range? Because your numbers will help us in speaking to our private equity people. And then once you have a domestic distributor like that kind of lined up, whether you sign with them or they just gave you some data, but you now have a package that you can go to someone like a Hanover House who might be able to put up some money or put up a distribution guarantee. And you also have the package now that you can go to private equity and say, we're not just giving you blue sky numbers that we invented in the middle of the night or that we found off of a Google search. We talked to this particular sales agent and this is what horror films are currently doing. And that's really important because the market changes and the technology changes all the time. The media of whether it's a VHS or a Laserdisc or a DVD or if it's streaming or if it's AVOD or if it's subscription or premium. I mean, there's how much money to be made varies as the market constantly matures. I do feel that we are about to enter what I would consider to be the golden age of AVOD, advertiser video on demand, and that's simply because as the market grows and as the economy remains a little shaky worldwide, people will want to maybe go more towards AVOD and less towards the premium services that are expensive and that they might not have that extra $20 a month now that some of their grocery goods have gone up. So I think we're about to have a real renaissance where AVOD is going to be big for the next 2 or 3 years. But anyway, you need numbers based on where the market's going to be because you make your movie, it's going to take 6 months to finish the movie. You don't want to know what's happening right now. You want to look at the overall trends and say, where's the market going to be 6 months from now when my movie's finally ready to start pitching for these placements. So, again.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like, having that distributor on board in the very, very early stages is really, really crucial for this to have those numbers and to have that credibility to pitch to investors. Is that something that's realistic for filmmakers who are making films with, a couple $100,000 who, might not have any big stars attached? Or do you think, and perhaps if it's a first time film producer, do you think they have a chance to bring on board a distributor that's also, a good distributor, I'd say, who's going to help them in that development phase, give them some of those numbers, and perhaps even give them some sort of a minimum guarantee?
I do think the answer is yes. I know that if you have the horrible experience of going to the American film market, which is my least favorite market, there's like 1,500, maybe there's not that many. It seems like there's 1,500 companies that say they're international distributors, and you got to be really careful because you want to get a distributor who has a reputation for paying its producers, and even the people that are really, really good at reporting and paying, they're still going to get lawsuits. I mean, that just happens. It's the nature of business because you've got somebody that thinks that they should have got the box office gross and not the share after the theaters, and so you always have kind of weird, what I would call frivolous lawsuits for any distributor out there, any of them. It's just, it's a part of the business. But if you can find a distributor who believes in your project, is accessible to you, will put up cash or put up a bankable guarantee, um, and give you, fair and timely reporting and all that, then that's a good distributor you want to go with. The answer is yes. If you've got a project for a couple $100,000 and you don't currently have any stars and you're not really sure what the revenue potential is, and you want to find out before you talk to Uncle Jimmy, um, a distributor can help you a lot of times more than you think. For example, a distributor might be able to say, I just got a call from the agent for such and such star, and because of their divorce, they desperately need, $10 or $20,000, and they'll come out and do your movie for a couple of days, and now your movie suddenly the credibility and stature of your movie dramatically changes because of information that the distributor had that you didn't have. Because a lot of times we get calls from agents and they tell us stuff like that. Do you have something that so and so can do? And I'm not going to tell you some of the most recent people that have contacted me, but yeah, I mean it's a distributor can be a real asset, and that's why I feel like you need to start the communication early on, and having the distributor communicating with you, whether you have a signed deal or not, just having them talking to you and helping you out. That's going to help you with your private equity people. You can say, look at these emails I got from so and so at Mill Creek Entertainment or whomever it is you're talking to. It does add a lot of credibility to your project. And distributors want you to make a good movie. They want you to make a movie that they can sell. They don't want you to make a crappy movie and now the guy from Korea will never buy from them again because they bought it before the movie was done and it turned out to be unwatchable, and they take it out on the distributor. They want the producers to make a good movie, and so I think that you can get a lot of help from the right people. And let's be honest, $200,000-$300,000, that's a lot of cash. That's a lot of capital to put at risk for somebody. It's practically a house in a lot of states. I mean, it's not inconsequential, and it shouldn't be treated as an inconsequential film. But by the same token, as I've kind of alluded to, not every movie idea deserves to be made, and I think it's really important that the producers be honest and have a certain degree of circumspection and self-analysis. Like, is there really a market for this movie? Would I want to see this movie? Would other people want to see this movie? Would they pay money to a babysitter and drive to the theater to pay $16 per ticket to see this movie? Or they just sit at home and watch it one night, or they turn it off after 5 minutes and flip over to one of 20,000 other movies that are available to them. So you need to be really honest with yourself and analyze the film, and if you believe that it has a real reason to exist, and you can do it for the right price, go to a distributor, and the good distributors will help you. They will help you package your film.
It sounds like one of the most important things when you're packaging that film is having these relationships with distributors who could be interested. And I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on how filmmakers, especially early on in their careers, how they can build up those connections and relationships with various distributors? I mean, is it at film markets? Is it just by emailing them? Like, what is a way so that they can build up the relationships, but also not be annoying to distributors who probably also want them to just get to the point?
That's a really good question. And I'm a big believer that a filmmaker should invest in themselves and pay for the money to get an admission badge to one of the major festivals, markets, not a, the major markets are not necessarily the major film festivals, but certainly EFM, which is in Berlin every February, Cannes Film Festival, which is in France every mid-May, Toronto. Those are the three main markets where a lot of independent and studio distributors will be there exhibiting and marketing goods. And remember that they're not there to be pitched. They're there to sell you somebody else's movie to, Singapore, Australia, wherever. And so you can't expect to get more than just a few minutes, maybe not even a few minutes, maybe 30 seconds. But if you hand them a flyer with a compelling piece of art on it and say, I'm putting together this movie, worldwide rights are available, or foreign rights, whatever's available. And after the market, I know you're here to sell other people's movies. After the market, give me a call. Let's figure out if it is something that fits for you. that little quick 20, 30 seconds is going to generate huge harvests for you. Because you care enough about the movie that you show up at a market. You presented a professional piece of artwork that distributor can see. This is how I would sell this movie. Wow, that's a really interesting looking poster. And then you said, contact me afterwards if you're interested. And they know that you're going to the next door and the next door and the next door. And they know, oh man, this is going to go. If I don't call this guy, somebody's going to get this. And I think that's the way that you develop the relationships. You just press the flesh. It's like retail politics. You go door to door. And the only place to do that is really those three markets. The next big market is the Cannes Film Festival, which this year is the 13th through the 24th of May in Cannes, France. And they have hundreds of sellers in the basement of the Palais. The Palais is where they screen the movies, and you see all the big stars go up the red carpet and opening night ceremony. I think I'm going. Mission Impossible 8, which is with Tom Cruise and a buddy of mine. And not Tom Cruise. There's a guy in a movie that's a buddy. Holt McCallany. I've met Tom Cruise a couple of times, but it's always just been quick pleasantries, and couldn't call him a buddy. Anyway, I would, if I were a filmmaker and I was about to spend $200,000 or so on a production or more, I'd get a plane ticket, I'd buy a festival pass, and I would go to the Palais in the basement and just take some flyers and just go booth to booth to potential distributors that you think are, philosophically interested in your type of movie. Obviously, if it's a horror film, you don't go to an animation company. Just go to the people that sell horror films. But you can walk past their booths and see the kind of posters they have displayed on the walls and think, hey, I can see how my movie might fit with these guys. And then you go up to the reception area, and most of them hire local French girls to be the receptionists. But just say, look, I'm a producer. I've got this film. Here's the artwork. Can I speak with somebody? And most of the time they'll say, yeah. And then they'll grab somebody, come and do a quick handshake, and then you move on. And you have just planted seeds for the future success of the rest of your career. And to me, it's a democratic opportunity. It's not closed. You don't have to, be born into, Steven Spielberg doesn't have to be your dad or whatever. To get to know these people, and these people want your film, and you have to understand that you've got something that they don't get paid unless they sell movies, and they need fresh movies, and so they want commercial films. So I think that's a really smart thing to do, even before you go knock on doors to friends and family to raise the equity, because you might find and I have to digress for just a moment to tell you the reason why I was hired as the CEO at Hemdale is because Credit Lyonnais Bank, which had been backing the company, removed a provision that they previously had. The provision they previously had on Hemdale was that they would finance any movie that they had at least a 50% pre-sale on. And of course, this in the early 80s and early 90s, there wasn't a lot of film incentive. So you couldn't get 50% from a government. You would have to basically find some distributor in Germany or France or somewhere that really loved the movie and said, yeah, I want to do that. And then Hemdale would take that pre-sale over to Franz Hoffman at Credit Lyonnais Bank Netherlands, and they would fund the whole movie because they had half of it pre-sold. That worked great until they ruined that. They basically said, you guys are so smart, we're not going to tie your hands anymore. You no longer have to get that pre-sale. Whatever you guys want to make, we'll finance. And they made 90 movies in a row that lost money. And you don't want to do that. You do not want to make movies because you emotionally like them. You want to make movies that people want to see. And the best way to find out movies that people want to see is to get a distributor to put money where their mouth is, to get a distributor to say, I think there's a market for this. I think people want to see this. I'm willing to commit X number of dollars. And then now it's so much easier to go to private equity and say, we're not just making this as a labor of love because we like to see dogs tap dancing, whatever the goofy idea might be. You now have some credibility. I just want to also, as an illustration, take a moment to tell you that we we got involved in a movie, and I actually have the comic book here. Oh, is it showing up backwards? I don't know. Anyway, it's called Unholy. Okay,
No,
so
no.
about a year ago, I got a call from a production company in Northern California, and they said, "We know you're starting to do some acting now, and we've seen some of your work. Would you be interested in playing the Exorcist in this micro budget horror film?" I said, "No, no, I'm not interested. I'm really busy." And they said, "No, just take a look at the part." So I looked at the part. I thought, wait a minute, it's it's the Exorcist in an exorcism movie, and why not? What do I stand to lose? It seems like a competently made script. And I went and I said to them after we were filming, I said, "What are you guys doing for distribution?" They didn't have any distribution. And I said, "Well, look, this is what I do." And we ended up licensing the distribution rights, and we paid them a very large advance. And we collectively said, if the movie hits a certain plateau, let's make a sequel. And now Hanover House is fully funding their sequel. They don't have to, get a pre-sale. They don't have to get Uncle Charlie's credit card. We're fully financing that movie. Why? Because we know what we're going to sell. We've already sold it. Placed it with all the streaming services. It's out in theaters. We've sold it to multiple foreign countries, and so why wouldn't we make a sequel? It makes a lot of sense. Any smart distributor is like that, and if you can get them to put a little bit of money on the table, then you know that they are motivated to get that money back. That they have skin in the game. They're motivated to make the movie work, because if they don't, they lose. And again, people work hard for their money, and people don't want to lose money. So, but I was going to say, this is something different.
That's really
This is a comic book that tells the plot of the movie. It's a 16-page comic book that ends without telling you the ending of the movie. It's a cliffhanger. And we made 50,000 copies of these and put them in the movie theater lobbies that people could grab a month before the film opened. And it really worked, because the comic books only cost us about 10 cents to print. And people were taking those comic books home, and then when the movie finally opened in theaters, like, "Oh, I've been reading this. I want to see how it ends." So that's just part of marketing. This is what a distributor does: is comes up with interesting marketing angles to try to elevate your picture above others. And that happened to be a micro budget picture with no stars, so we had to do something like that. So,
absolutely. Listen, Eric, this has been so interesting. Unfortunately, we're coming to an end, so this is all that we've got time for today. As we're coming up to the full hour, but there is so much more interesting information over here that we've gotten out of this talk. How can filmmakers reach out to you or Hannover Films? Are you currently accepting films for distribution? And who would you like to hear from?
I'm super accessible. If you send me an email, I'll respond pretty quickly, unless I'm on a movie set or something. But if it's something that we can do something with, we'll tell you right away. And if it's something that's not right for us, we will also tell you right away, because I know a lot of people can just get killed with a prolonged maybe. You need to know, whether a guy's going to work with you or not. So, I am, my email is interlink media. And that's 3 words, like like entertainment, link, like connecting, and media, interlinkmedia@gmail.com. I also have a website, hanoverhouse.com. There's 2 N's in Hanover, like the German city, hanoverhouse.com. So you can reach me at eric@hanoverhouse.com or interlinkmedia@gmail.com. And we'll look at your project. We'll say whether we can do something with it or not. And if we can't, most of the time I'll say, why don't you try so-and-so or so-and-so? I know that they're looking for that, so we want filmmakers to be successful. We're filmmakers ourselves. And it's, we're not trying to create a closed door. We're trying to create an opportunity for fresh talent to succeed. So I'm going to get a shot of you on the board.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Great. Well, once again, Eric, thank you so much. It has been a really, really interesting talk. And yeah, you provided, I think, a lot of interesting insights for everyone. So once again, thank you so much for joining us here today. You can
ask me back anytime.
We hope you enjoyed the episode and advice. If you want us to keep bringing you more guests, all we ask for is one simple favor. Subscribe to our channel wherever you're listening. By doing that, you help us reach more filmmakers like you, and in turn, we can keep delivering the tools you need to succeed. So please hit that subscribe button and let's keep this journey going together.